I think the essential thing for students of the programs that the General is advocating is immersion and not, the American education separates and separates. It separates people out till they're just with the kind of people just like them in some way. And this program should be about integrating. It should be about taking people and putting them back out in the world where they get to meet every other person who's their fellow citizen. But I also think it seems to me the trouble, we live in a world that has a real danger, which is that education is such a privilege in this country, and then one ends up privileged, and then you look out at a world that has many problems. Well, where do those come from? We need to train people to think that their education was about equipping them to be the solver of problems. And when people go out and participate in these things, they learn that problems aren't just something out there that are a given that one stays home and either feels bad about or speaks whiningly about, as is so common in America nowadays. You use the phrase "can do." It seems to me that's one of the main contributions here, is for people to realize that actually active citizens can accomplish things.
We've been thinking about how do we deploy cohorts of young people in particular schools. Some are teaching through TFA. One is advising through the College Advising Corps. There's a new program called Artist Year. Maybe 3 are introducing arts back into the curriculum because they were fine arts majors in college. And then that school becomes a different place because of the presence of those folks. If you take that analogy and you say, okay, what's the problem in Charlotte? Lack of economic mobility is a huge problem in Charlotte. So how do we interrupt generational poverty? And what if we place students working on that problem in multiple nonprofits for a year, focused on pilots that could that could break the cycle of poverty from one generation to the next. So I think there's lots of choices, but if we articulate the value proposition, make clear the return on investment to those who would pay for it, and then together choose which problems to focus on, and that might be regional, I think we could implement the year of service much more quickly.
Every year, over 300,000 hours of service in the community, in the state, around the country, around the world, are logged by our kids. So the environment is receptive to the notion of service and to service as a way of putting meaning into people's lives. But what we're talking about in this particular initiative is something far more complex, demanding, and expensive. Really hard to get going. We're talking about doing it for a year, and we're talking about having enough money to keep the wolf from the door for the students, for the young people who are engaged in it. And as one of my torch professors in law school used to say, he said it with amazing frequency, money isn't everything, but it's everything else. And that is, of course, true. By no stretch of the imagination is it everything. If you don't start with good people, no hope. But if you haven't got some money, really hard to get it going, and even harder to sustain it.
You have to make critical investments on your campus in the faculty and the personnel that can oversee meaningful experiences for your students.
That's right.
It's one thing to say it's important, it's another to actually implement it. And as the public guy up here that just finished a legislative session at 4 a.m.,
they've gone home?
They've gone, well, not quite. We're looking more to partnerships with cities and municipalities, because if you look all across this table, universities are finding more innovation in moving forward in the communities they live in and work in, and not waiting on the federal government and the state government to help us move initiatives forward. So you have to have people in your employ that work with those communities to find meaningful opportunities for your students and make it a robust part of the curriculum. And that takes, that takes investing in people.